Hey, to our listeners, welcome to Homeless in San Diego. My name is Greg Angel, our host. Very honored to be joined by Natalie Raschke today.
Hi, thank you.
Natalie, mother of four, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
And I appreciate you bringing your youngest, Miss
Yes.
Lulu, with us today. Nice to see you, Lulu. And Natalie, we were just catching up a little bit. You were sharing with me about your background. And for our listeners, today we're going to talk about family homelessness. And Natalie, you're here to share your story, here to share your struggles, here to share what you've overcome and your voice, because you're advocating for others to not have to experience and go through some of the things that you've gone through. So let's start with that. Let's help our listeners understand what you and your family have gone through. You were sharing before we started just now about you, your family of four, you and your husband working in the restaurant industry, and it's a long story, but COVID happens. You have complications with pregnancy. You spend some time with family where you're from originally up in Sacramento, and then you all have a plan. You come back to San Diego, and it just doesn't work out.
Right. So on our way back, San Diego, we purchased this RV. Had made some reservations to park the RV in a RV park, and took 3 months from Sacramento. Took the 101 and came back down to San Diego.
And this is during COVID, so your profession, restaurant industries, they're all closed, right?
Right. Right. That was
Um,
one of the hardest hit sectors, I believe,
yeah.
when the shutdown and the opening back up. It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't a secure place to be in that job.
Yeah. But you and your husband were very secure before COVID
Oh,
happened
yeah, yeah,
and were, it sounds like, earning a pretty good living.
right. I had 401k, we had 2 cars, a motorcycle, um, never been through the system, and that's a shocker too.
Of course.
Um, yeah, we were doing pretty good. I had enough to buy an RV and take 3 months to go down the 101, you know?
And you reserved a place to stay at an extended stay RV park. And the plan was that you'd have some time to kind of get settled back into San Diego.
Yeah. Yeah, and figure out what we were going to, what the future held for us. We had, like I said, we had 401k. We had a savings.
Yeah. So what
Um,
happened from there?
well, that situation didn't really work out. And we ended up roaming on the streets with this 36-foot RV, and we
Ooh,
had no idea what where else to go. We had specifically planned, left, did did a 3 month, you know, 101 in an RV, to park, get our reservation, park for about 2 weeks, and then we were asked to leave because they said there was too many people residing in the RV. But I never lied about how many people were in the RV. Whoever, made these transactions, allowed us to. So it was kind of an ordeal. That was a little traumatic. Um, we invested in something that didn't play out, basically.
where did you go the first night when you had to leave with your
Uh,
family?
Mission Bay, Mission Bay.
Which is near where you were, near
Yeah.
the
So
RV park that you were
right.
in, and the kids are going to school there, right?
Well, not in the beginning because it was
Okay.
still they had a second lockdown.
Yeah.
We stayed like by Deanza Cove, and we started getting a lot of tickets. Then we found Mariners Cove. Do you know where that's at? Over by across the street from Bahia.
Yeah,
They
I
have that
do.
long strip,
Mhm.
and we stayed there for months until because they stopped ticketing for a while during that second lockdown.
Yeah.
So there was only about 3 or 4 of us in the RV that had realized there's this long strip and they're not ticketing anybody. So we parked there for good 4 or 5 months, and then things started opening back up, and this ordinance where they could start ticketing because there was an ordinance saying, there's no ticketing if people are inhabiting in their vehicle.
Mhm.
You know, they're not allowed to ticket.
Mhm.
Well, things started opening back up, and then we were just getting hit with tickets. I meant to bring them and I forgot them, but I have a stack. I think it shows in Lisa's story.
Yeah.
They're all fanned out.
Some of the some of the things that I'm sharing here are from that story for our listeners. It's Voice of San Diego. Natalie, you shared your story with Lisa Halverstadt, who's been on our show, and so you can see some of those photos and learn more of the story there. During those months where you're first without housing, I mean, you've lost the ability to stay at the RV park. The world is shut down. It's COVID. What was that like for you and your family?
I was a little overwhelming because I couldn't get a hold of anybody. At first, we're like, this is wrong. Trying to call legal aid, anything. And then I realized nobody's. n- It hit me. We're on lockdown. Nobody's answering the phone.
Mhm.
You couldn't get a hold of, and I couldn't get a hold of anybody. So we're like, well, we're playing this out until things start opening back up. And that was good. Seemed like good 4 or 5 months. It seemed that long. I believe it was a good 3 months.
And then once the world does start opening up, that's when the tickets start happening. That's when you start getting tickets for parking your RV in
Yes.
places.
And other people were finding out about, this long, Mariners, is it Mariners Cove or Mariners Way?
Something like that. Yeah.
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 And so then there was just RV after RV after RV.
Probably more tickets and
Yes.
more enforcement at that point.
Yes. And so then we were trying to find other places to stay. So we parked, we started hiding in certain places. I won't say, particularly in case people are still, parking in certain places, but yeah, we had to move. We started moving around all over San Diego.
And you mentioned traumatic earlier. This had to have been very traumatic for you, for your husband, and most of all for your kids.
Oh, well, yeah. When you're in it, especially, it would seem just so intense at moments.
Yeah.
You don't think about the trauma. You're not realizing that trauma's being, you know, um, it's happening.
You're
You're
in
just
survival
in
mode.
correct. You're just in survival mode. And like you're talking about my husband, he doesn't talk much about that experience. He doesn't join me for any of the stuff that I do. And that's okay. It really does a number on a man. I don't know if people are aware what it does to a man and then what it does to a woman. But we were a unit, so that's so, it's so much more. I was lucky, if you can say lucky, to have that unit. And you make a family unit with the people that you're surrounded by that are also homeless. And I made family with people that I trusted my children with. So I didn't
Mm.
have to jump in the car and take them with us to the store with me. These are homeless people that I trusted watching my children. I really did, right? And they were excited to be part of our family because even when the kids would come out and go talk to them, I don't know what it is, but they would get so excited to see my kids and always wanted to give them something,
Mm.
and the children got used to, that's just Greg or that's,
Mhm.
so and so.
Mhm.
And that becomes like their uncle or aunt. And so it was really special. That was, if I take away what was special about it, that was special because I could see them lighting up and that they maybe didn't have that. And having that when you're homeless, this youth that someone's happy to see you and it's a kid and it's not just,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
really, you could tell that it was helpful to them too.
Our show always has calls to action. We always ask our guests, and we'll do that later in this episode. And most of our guests who have experienced homelessness, they almost always implore our listeners to just treat people with dignity and respect, right?
Right.
And for people who are on the streets to be treated like a human being. And so I appreciate you sharing what you're sharing now, that individuals who are also in the similar experience back when your family was living in the RV, not just to be treated with respect by you and your family, but for them to be able to give back that
Right.
respect.
Right.
That's empowering.
Well, and sometimes, they would go and get their free, snacks or lunches. Every week there was a group that would come and either serve hot food at
Hmm.
night or
Hmm.
and we never went over there. It just wasn't something that we did. Um like it's talking about my husband, very prideful,
Sure.
and what that mentally does to a man, it becomes where I became afraid for him and for the public
Mhm.
because he was being pushed to his limits.
Mhm.
I don't know if you want to touch on things that people would do to us while we were parked sometimes. Um, People are just can be really rude, mean, you know.
You're talking about the, like, community at large and, yeah, people who
Right.
yeah,
At
yeah.
least I didn't touch on much of that, and that's okay. You know, she wanted to focus on what we were dealing with at the time and my family. People would leave their headlights on us, you know, turn them on the brights, especially when we were parked in Crown Point for an hour. Just their brights, two different cars, things like that. You know, drive up and say stuff, and my husband was being pushed to a, you know, where he was
To his breaking point, like you said.
right, and I became afraid
Yeah.
for him and the public.
Well, thank God you all made it through that, and, you know, these are challenging conversations and these are challenging spaces to hold. And it's important to name the the indignities that are experienced, because a lot of our listeners have not gone through what you've gone through, right? And so for you to be able to share these things is empowering.
Well, and one, you know, we stayed some time in Crown Point, and there people would have gatherings, so there would be, you know, 4th of July and certain things like that. There are particular times where I'm assuming they could tell that we, you know, were residing in this RV, and people would just randomly feel like they needed to say their opinion about how we were living,
Mm,
you know, because my kids are running around and I'm feeding them out there. That's another challenge. Food,
hmm.
food, and sharing a meal with somebody um, is something that's huge.
What were you and your husband doing to try to overcome this situation? I mean, obviously, the main thing is surviving.
Right.
Obviously, taking care of your family. At the same time, you're also trying to improve your situation. So, what did that look like during that time?
Well, it's all kind of spread out. So when things started opening back up, my husband got a job. He got a job with Ralph's actually, um, and I wasn't couldn't go back to work. I had 4 children. You
Taking care
can't,
of the kids.
yeah,
Yeah,
you can't go to work and leave them in the car.
sure.
You know, if his schedule's a certain
Yeah,
way, and
yeah.
school eventually opened up. Um, just trying to save as much money as we could. But when you are homeless, it's really not that cheap if you're trying to um, eat well and buy healthy foods and cook food. You know, they make you don't have a refrigerator. You don't, you maybe have an ice chest. And I had 5 mouths to feed.
Mm.
You, you, you can't just eat. Well, you can junk, but it's cheaper. Um, But eating unhealthy also affects your mood, your attitude, your brain, you know, so it became extremely expensive and difficult.
And we should all remember that cost of food went up significantly during COVID, overall cost of living, housing as well. But even if you're not in your situation, you're not paying for housing because you are unsheltered, but still all these other things are so expensive. Your husband's working full time, you're taking care of the kids. Um, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come back. And when we come back, I'd like for our listeners to hear how this situation ends with the RV. And then we're going to get into some of the advocacy work
Okay.
that you're leading on, Natalie. So we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Natalie and I were just talking during the break that you're called to do this work, called to share what you're doing today. So thank you for that. Right before we went to break, you were sharing about the journey and what it was like being homeless, living in the RV, raising your 4 kids. Your husband's working full time, but it got worse because that RV ended up. Well, you want to share what happened?
So during that time, we had received a, a huge amount of tickets, and that wasn't helping.
Sure.
Um, that weighing on the back of our, minds because we couldn't pay them. And
Mhm.
if you don't pay them within 21 days, then they go up.
Mhm.
I'm not joking. I think I received in 1 month over 15 tickets. I
Wow.
felt like I was being harassed.
Yeah.
So then we really started park we still had a car and a motorcycle,
Mhm.
you know, park car in the back, motorcycle in the front because we knew we were up to be towed. Um, and one night staying at a hotel because we would stay at hotels whenever we got a chance to give the kids a break. I got lazy and parked the car inside the hotel, and RV was taken.
It was towed.
It was towed. It was towed. We woke up to take the kids to school. We didn't even bring anything inside the hotel, and it was gone. And I just knew. I just knew it was gone. So we didn't have any backpacks. We didn't have any laptops. We didn't have any books. We didn't have any clothes.
The kids' school supplies were in the
Everything,
RV, everything.
everything towed to um, really close to the border.
Down to Chula Vista.
Yeah,
And
San
so
Ysidro.
what did San Ysidro, so what did you do at that point?
We were just kind of frozen. My husband had he couldn't miss a day of work. He could have, but what was that going to do?
Yeah.
Take one day of work away. That's huge for us at that
Mhm.
time. And we had already been dealing with the system, trying to find any resources that we can that would be helpful to us. But when you're a family of four and your husband's working, we fall in this medium, this middle area. So we didn't really qualify for anything because he worked too much. He was working 60, 70 hours a week. But that was going to feeding my kids. You don't have a refrigerator, icebox, eating outside. We had a generator on the RV, so filling that with gas, and then if you're moving around, and so we stayed a night at a hotel in Claremont and woke up and it was gone.
And
And
so then you really start putting even more effort into trying to get help, get assistance, right?
right, I realized that I wasn't getting anywhere with the system.
Yeah.
Um, they're all calling 211. There's so many different answers from so many different people. And then
Mhm.
it's like retelling your story over and over. And every time you tell your story and you're reliving what you're still living, you get a different answer. And then they call you this to give you this number to call this place, or they tell you to go here. And then you realize, oh, you don't qualify for that. And I finally had it. And I said, this is out of control. I'm a uh, willing and able-bodied person. I don't have any disabilities, and I'm becoming so overwhelmed. I can't maneuver through this system, and I don't know how anybody can. And I was an organized person,
Mhm.
4 kids, a
Think
mom,
yeah.
like I said, a college graduate, collegiate athlete, and I could not seem to get a hold of wrapping my mind and being on top of what I'm supposed to do.
So how did you eventually
S-
overcome the situation?
So I just started thinking, and I, said I had written the mayor a few times, and I never got a response. And I said, I got to find somebody who's going to listen to me because I don't see how this is going to end well. You know, we were after the RV was taken, we had a little bit left of what was of our savings, and we bought a van. So that we lived for 6.5 months in a van, 6 people.
So you went from living in an RV to living in a van.
Hmm.
You're trying to access help by calling resources. They're not getting you anywhere. You're writing the mayor of San Diego, not hearing back there. So now you're living in a van.
And we stayed another night in a hotel. And I just started digging reporters, and Lisa Halverstadt came up. I just Googled, before that was before like I had access to AI. I'm sure there was AI, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and Lisa's name came up. So I started researching her and I said, she has to be the one. So I emailed her and she contacted me back like I think the next day. And I said, I need my kids, I need their faces to be known and seen because I it's unacceptable and I can no longer manage life this way, and how can anybody?
So she writes a story about your family and your family's experience, and we'll link to it in the show notes for our listeners. And then it sounds like she was a part of then linking you to services
Yeah.
or actually
Um,
just housing assistance, right? It was some rental assistance that
right.
you
Well, she actually followed me for 3.5, 4 months. Lisa did. She followed my family, would come meet with us about 3 to 4 days a week. Her and Patty, I mean, Peggy Petey.
Yeah, yeah.
They, I mean, that's a lot for someone to follow a family and what I did every day. And they would just be like flies on the wall. And it says in the story, but yeah, 4.5 months she followed me to really be able to share the story that she felt, to do us justice, in which she did. And I think 3 days after that story hit, I got a phone call saying that, a voucher's become available to you. And in those 3 days before I got that phone call, I had a lot of people reaching out, a lot. It was almost overwhelming where she said, I don't know what to do. These people, are emailing me and like hundreds of people. Um, that was overwhelming because I didn't understand when we were out there in the open. You go through these emotions, and alls I really wanted was to be left alone, by people. If I'm trying to survive, you're not helping. If you're not going to help, just leave me. I wrote the mayor, can I get a special sticker so I don't keep getting ticketed because my van's going to be ticketed now. Um, it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming with a lot of emotions, for my children. People they were reading comments. I didn't read any of the comments, but my children would say, "Do you see what they said about you in this?" And I said, I don't care," because there were bad comments too.
Yeah.
People's opinions on choices I had made. That didn't bother me so much, but it was really overwhelming because I had set out to do something, and somebody helped me, and it helped in such a major way. And she didn't have to do that. She didn't have to follow me for 3.5. She could have just wrote a story, you know. And they connected to her, and I'm still, I still consider Lisa my saving grace, and we have a lot of contact. Um,
Called her an angel earlier.
yes, I did. Yeah.
There's something really tragic about your experience living in community in Pacific Beach and Crown Point, surrounded by people who look at you. You're talking about all the negative ways, negative things people were doing to you, housed people were doing to you, right? Don't know you, don't seemingly want to know you. And it takes your story being shared in media for people who have no connection to you to then connect
Right.
and for an outpouring of support for hundreds of people to reach
Ri
out
right,
and want
where
to help.
I made sure that I, contacted each and every person that,
That
contacted
reached
me
out to you.
because I
And through that time, you're also trying to get help. You're reaching out, you're asking for assistance, you're connecting with groups, reaching out to the mayor of San Diego, not getting anywhere. But once the media story comes, then a resource comes forward.
right. And I don't think people are aware of how many families and people that are really trying to obtain these resources that really are limited. They really, really are, and I don't think people really understand. Even if I accept a resource, that doesn't mean it's coming that exact moment and it makes my life better or it makes me off the street. I
Hmm.
really don't think people understand that. And even if when I get the voucher, I still was homeless for a period, a good 30, 40 days.
Yeah. So you were able to access an emergency housing voucher, which is a housing voucher that was issued during COVID. It was part of of the federal government's intervention to help people who were impacted by COVID. And the promise was that those vouchers would be around for a number of years. And we're going to get to in a minute what's happening with those vouchers. What you're describing, though, is that just getting the voucher doesn't end your homelessness. You still had to find a place to live, right?
Yeah,
And you said it took 30 or 40 days.
right. And kindly enough, some path put us up in a hotel for 30 days, 30, 40 days until that was ready, but
That's good.
also before
That's
that,
another or nonprofit organization
yes.
path that you mentioned. Yeah, so they helped you out there.
Um, the next day, Sean Elio Rivera had read my story and asked, Lisa, I need her to come speak at city council. We'll give her as many minutes. I've never spoken before.
So
As
this
many
is
minutes. Yeah, I
council
think.
member Elo Rivera
Mhm.
reads the story. Okay.
Yes, says, and actually Lisa said, "Oh, he wants your phone number. Can he
Yeah.
call you?" I'm like, "Okay." And he said, "I would be honored if can you come and speak because we're thinking about this safe parking lot, trying to make it 24 hours or there was something going on. There was
Hmm.
something that they were working on and I'd never done any, never went to a city council or board of supervisors. I really didn't know, what that meant as in you want me to speak. Okay. But John Brady, who's, the head of LEA, which is one of the
Live
lived experience advisors,
group
not
of individuals with lived homeless experience and focused on advocacy and supporting people to be able to advocate like you were invited to do.
yeah, and for systematic changes. So I
Yeah.
do a lot of public speaking now.
Yeah.
And after I spoke at the city council, they made the safe parking lot 24 hours, which was unheard of because we couldn't ever. That was one of the things we couldn't even use that resource because my son played high school sports. So sometimes they don't get out of if they're on junior varsity. You're not getting out till 8 o'clock at night. You have to be in and out. There wasn't 24 hours.
Because the earlier safe parking program required being in by 7 p.m., right? Because
Correct.
you can't be there, high school practice, a lot of restrictions. And so your advocacy helped change that. And it shows the power of you bringing your lived experience. So it's not a community member, it's not a nonprofit provider, it's somebody who's actually living it. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And when they said that on the news, I told my kids, I'm like, we did that. And they're
Yeah.
just like, what? They
Yeah.
didn't understand at that point, like how huge for me it was. For me, it was a big deal because, like I said, when they're offering you resources, are offering to park here, it's not that simple. It's not that simple.
It isn't. And it's why it's so important that we put ourselves in the shoes and understand from the perspectives of people experiencing homelessness what it's like, just how many challenges there are. Um,
So many. And so now I'm dedicated to um I'm dedicated to this work and I try to put myself in every position that I can to advocate and share what that's like because it is personal. And you don't always have this people don't have time to go to city council that
sure.
are in a position that either really struggling or they're working two jobs. So I try to speak on behalf, and even if they, don't know who I am or they even know I exist, that I know that they're out there and speak my truth because I know what that's like. But it's something you can't even. This experience is more valuable than a college degree.
And it is because you're creating impact that someone with a college degree alone can't create. You're bringing your lived experience to inform, to change the system, like you said. We're going to take one more break. And then when we come back, we're going to get a little bit more into share more about the advocacy, your housing situation, and need for advocacy. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. When we took a break, Natalie was sharing before the break. Natalie was sharing about the not just the amount of time that you spent homeless, but just how once you got that voucher, that lifeline, it didn't magically end your homelessness. You still had to find a place that would rent to you. How does the housing voucher work? How much are you paying? How does it make housing affordable? And what was it like when you moved into that apartment?
So before this voucher as well, while Lisa was following us, we were applying to apartments. Um, but when you're homeless for a certain period of time, you have these gaps. You know, that makes it very difficult. And every time you go to put in a rental application, you're charged monies with
45, $50 an
yes per
application?
person
Yeah.
if you're
Wow.
over 18.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even though it was me and my husband, we each still had to pay.
Hmm.
Um, but when this voucher came, spent 30, 40 days in a hotel. And thankfully, we had support in that. But then it was finding a place with this voucher that is also a challenge.
Mm.
It You don't know who, even though everybody has to, make vouchers available or access them
Rent to
to
yeah.
rent to people that have vouchers, it doesn't mean that they will,
Yeah, you can't not rent to somebody because they have a voucher, but it doesn't mean you have to select them when you have 1 opening and 50 applicants, right?
right?
So it's really hard.
And you're not on paper, you don't look like the best
Yeah.
applicant.
When on the in the story, the example is given that, you're looking at an apartment that's 2,100 a month. You can pay that. In fact, you're paying $2,500 a month in hotels,
Right.
right, at that
Yes,
time, right? So it's
exactly.
not a matter of
Yes.
paying, it's a matter of
Yes.
getting approved.
Right.
Yeah,
And them wanting you to make 3 times the amount of rent,
yeah,
that you would owe. So that was like, okay, now we have a voucher in this time, you know, now we got to find a place that will take this voucher. But luckily, we had somebody helping us do that for us. So once we had that voucher, I also had somebody helping me find a place to where they were making all the contacts. That was a blessing as well.
Oh, nice. Was that somebody in a like a nonprofit organization or
It was with the housing commission. I had
okay,
somebody
the
helping
San Diego
me.
Housing Commission.
Yes.
Very cool. So they helped you find a place,
Yes.
somebody who would say yes.
Yep.
What was
And
that like when you finally
it was overwhelming. I mean, I think it was overwhelming because the kids were just like, it's almost like they'd never lived in a house before. I kind of laughed because I mean, they were running around. I'm like, what are you guys doing? You act like you've never had a house before. But that's what it did for them.
yeah.
I laugh now, but they were. They were running around like they'd never been in a house. And so that made me think like how intense it was. They're
Yeah,
resilient. They really, really are. And for a long time, they didn't tell people at school that they were homeless, and that's a whole nother story. And
sure.
eventually, they got, were done living a lie, and you know, their friends accepted that. But after this voucher, it was super helpful.
The voucher made it possible. The way these vouchers work for our listeners is that um, Natalie, you and your husband pay a portion of the rent,
Correct.
and the voucher pays
It's
the
thirty
balance.
percent, and the voucher pays 70%.
And how long ago was that you moved
It
in?
was 3 years in
3
August.
Oh, congratulations. So 3 years. Um, you're here today because you're an advocate. You're here today because you're a change maker. You're here because you are committed to changing these systems that didn't work for you for a long time, right?
Right.
You talked earlier about advocating at city council level in San Diego, changes that resulted in. Um, recently, you went to a higher level, started talking to Congress and Senate. Can you share about what you're advocating for and what those experiences are?
Um, yeah, it's been a little for me. It's been amazing. You start out at city council, and then I've worked my way up to where now I have meetings where I'm going to speak to senators and representatives. And I was able to do that just last month. I got to speak one on one with Juan Vargas, and we had his undivided attention. Me and two of my children. Randomly, nobody had the right Zoom link except for me. And so it was me and Juan Vargas and my 2 kids.
Wow.
And it was really, to me, was really special because it may not seem like a lot, but when you're fighting a battle that is, you feel like you're always losing, to get up there and be able to voice a story. And I hope people know, like, I'm representing a mass community. And I hope they know, like, I take that personal, this representation. And so I work a lot with the street medicine here and in LA.
Oh,
We help.
I wanna our listeners to learn about that. Before we get to that though, what did you ask Congressman Juan Vargas to do? What were you advocating for them and the senators to take action on?
Well, so this big, beautiful bill is doing a lot of cuts, and the cuts that it's making is cutting my voucher. So I was, you know, you know, urging them to talk to their constituents and, tell them my story that if they do this, I wasn't prepared because I was told. And that's another thing about being homeless. You're always told these things and there's no follow through sometimes, or it just becomes unavailable. or there's always something.
So the housing voucher that has been a lifeline for you and your family is on the chopping block
It is,
as a
yes.
result of of HR1, the tax bill that you mentioned.
Mhm.
There are other threats to what we call permanent housing resources, housing subsidies.
Yep,
Um,
permanent supportive housing, quite a few, cuts that are gonna be affecting a lot of people.
we're recording this during the government shutdown, and part of the continuing resolution that is being proposed, the legislation that Congressman Vargas and others will vote on to ultimately reopen the government. There's a section in there that specifically renews some of these permanent housing funds. It may or may not get included. Both House and Senate committees have recommended it be included. This would prevent um, what what is being reported, which is that the federal government is seeking to put a cap on how much federal money can be used to support housing. Locally, let me be really specific. That would mean that 1,200 people would lose their housing who have vouchers like you and your family have. And that's just one piece. That doesn't even get to the changes in HR1, to what you were advocating Congressman Vargas about. So there are wholesale cuts that are potentially coming, which are going to result in people losing their housing.
A lot of people. I'm not sure that, people understand how many people, because if it's not your reality and you don't know what that just because it's 1,200 vouchers, there's not just one person with each voucher, that's multiple people on one voucher.
Yep.
And if we're already so tight on resources now, that how are we gonna serve those there's gonna be a lot of more homeless people, out there, and we potentially are one of those people. When you're told it was till 2030 we had, you
That
know?
was the original commitment,
Yes,
2030. These
2030.
emergency housing vouchers would go until 2030.
Yeah,
Is it 2030,
yeah.
Natalie?
And it was, like, not even a it's just cut off.
Yeah, yeah.
We have till this time next year to figure it out.
'Cause it's not 2030, it's only 2025,
Mhm.
and, you are, leading your family, you're leading systems change. What you're sharing today makes an impact. People are learning things through listening to this and hearing your story that they didn't know, and so, I'm gonna get into our call to action, and then I wanna make sure you have a chance to share about the other work that you're doing with street medicine outreach, and anything else that you wanna share today. Call to action is to reach out to your elected leaders at the federal level right away to let them know that cuts to housing assistance are unacceptable and they're going to result in people losing their housing. And there's no reason that they need to happen, and that we need their support to preserve the housing assistance that's there. Natalie, what are your calls to action?
You know, I have so many.
Yeah,
I like I said previously, I've never been part of this what they call this system. Um, it's so sometimes it's hard to find the words that even if you you can't feel like you're not effective, you can be by kindness, by if you're not gonna if you're gonna walk by, say hello. Don't cross the street. Don't, you know, give this. We can read your faces,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
um, and remember that if the if everybody's thriving, we're not gonna, everybody has different needs that they need. We could talk about this for hours. We need more hospital beds. We need all of these things. But if your community's thriving, things will work out better. So, like, we need people to thrive, even at any pay level.
Hmm.
That is essential for a community to stay. whole or grounded or moving forward, or it benefits everybody.
In other words, it's not okay for people to not have housing because they simply can't afford it or they lost it and they can afford it, but they can't find anyone who will actually allow them to afford it by paying for it.
It doesn't I it doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't make any sense to I mean, if we're gonna go on a whole 'nother tangent, then maybe there's part of something that is trying to happen. A bigger agenda, what is this for? Because it doesn't make any sense.
Well, and I think, like you said, we could talk hours about all these things, right? And I went to one technical detail about the continuing resolution that will hopefully reopen the federal government someday and how hopefully it will include something that will keep these housing assistance there. But at the highest level, what you're speaking to is much more um, evergreen, which is that if we just say this is not okay, we all need to thrive, we need to care for each other, that leads to the positive outcomes we're looking for.
And if we stand together and united, that is going to generate better outcomes for everybody.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, it
100%.
it this energy that it brings out in each person in their behaviors is affects everybody.
You're doing so much on this. During the break, you were sharing about the expert opinions and expert experience you're providing San Diego County and their street medicine teams. You're helping them to better connect and build trust with people who they're outreaching to who are homeless and in need of medical assistance.
Yes. Last year I was actually on a speaking panel with the street medicine team,
Nice.
actually, at the RTFH conference. And we helped them how to better assist the people that are out there homeless because we have the lived experience. And I was proud to be a part of, I'm dealing with doctors that are dealing with patients that HIV, wound care, people that are really need, medical assistance. And they're asking, how would you address this situation? That's huge. That's
Because
huge for me.
because they were having problems building trust, they're having problems connecting with people, and so they
Right?
bring their medical expertise, you bring your lived experience to help them understand, and from that, you're creating that unity and that positive outcome we were
Right.
talking about earlier.
Right. And
Yeah.
what I was saying to you too, there's a disconnect. I think there's a disconnect with my community. There's a
Mm.
disconnect with people that are making these laws. There really is a disconnect. And so I try to live every day without fear. You know, if we can show gratitude and be helpful to our community, I think that that has led me to be fortunate in having these blessings. Everybody deserves to have a home. But when we remember the power we have, and we can remember that and not let fear take away from us, and let this these negative energies or aspects to everything, it really affects your vibration and how we move forward. And so it's ripples, and
Well,
that has to do with everybody in the community.
it it does have to do with everybody in the community, but it doesn't if people who have privilege who aren't impacted by cuts in housing vouchers, who aren't impacted by cuts in access to healthcare, who aren't impacted by cuts in food assistance. If they don't, if people who aren't impacted by that don't know about it or don't care about it or don't give it uh,
Right,
mental
thought.
attention,
Right,
thought,
right,
right?
right,
Then doesn't,
right,
it doesn't resonate, right?
right.
And that's where there is such a disconnect. And I'm so grateful for you helping to
And
bridge
that's
that disconnect.
and that's what basically why I do the work that I
Yeah,
do. And
I get
it's
it.
it's not a highly paid position,
Yeah.
but it's for the greater good, because if you see me, you wouldn't say, "Oh, she's homeless." So I bring faces to what um, we're dealing with. It's not just what the narrative is.
Yeah. Well, Natalie, thank you for connecting with
Of course.
us, with our listeners. Thank you for your tireless advocacy, for everything that you've overcome, your family. Miss Lulu, thank you for joining us today. Um, Natalie's youngest, who's here with us in, I guess we call it a studio. It's really just my office, but yeah, I appreciate, and I think our listeners really connect with what you've shared. Anything? Well, you close us out, Natalie. Share how you'd like to end the
Um,
episode,
I
and you have the
appre-
last word.
I appreciate you having letting me tell my story, and I've been really trying to um, speak as much as I can. I speak a lot at City Council, Board of Supervisors. I spoke at Juan Campillo, Raul Campillo's. He's my in my district. I spoke at one of his town halls, and I had people come up to me and say, I didn't know that." And these are, the older crowd. So that made me, think like I need to speak more. So I appreciate you letting me come tell this story. Because people, if they don't, if nobody's telling them, how do you know? So that's what I'm here to do. So I'm very grateful. And I'm not looking for anyone to save me. I just want people to understand that we, when you're in the system and you're out there and you're homeless, it's a whole nother ball game. And just to understand that.